Okay. So before we start, it is assumed that your consent has been given to record this meeting and post it on social media platforms. Good evening, everyone. I welcome you all to today's Alma Connect session. I, Ishita Bhatia, would be a host for this evening. Today, joining us are Principal Ma'am Professor Vibha Singh Chauhan, who would be joining us soon, and our staff coordinator, Dr. Seema Joshi. Before we start, I'd request Seema Joshi ma'am to give the welcome note. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ishita. Good evening, everyone. As all of us have been experiencing right now, this academic session 2020-21, it is very unique for all of us because the COVID triggered disruptions forced us to migrate to online teaching learning. Virtual classes, virtual meetings, virtual seminars, and even virtual celebrations. These are the new normals for us. And look at the way we celebrated our Founders' Day in the year 2021, following a hybrid model for the first time. This year, after the formation of Kirorimal College Alumni Network during Corona period, we thought of having a month-long celebration of our Founders' Day instead of one day. And that too, by bringing in one of the important stakeholders of our institution with us, and that is our very own alumni, whom we consider to be our brand ambassadors. We adopted celebrating our young alumni achievers as a theme during the first week of February, knowing very well that India is a youthful country. And as an educational institution, we understand very well our social responsibility too. We are shaping young minds by giving them right kind of education and trying to ensure right kind of ambience for learning. We organized panel discussions, speaker sessions, experience sharing sessions through this knowledge sharing platform of the KMC Alumni Network, wherein our young alumni participated and did career guidance, mentoring, and handholding of our current students during the month of February. If the theme celebrating our young alumni achievers was apt for the first week of February, the theme celebrating diversity and inclusivity appeared to be even more relevant to us during the second week of February, which marked the setting in of spring also. During the following weeks, we celebrated ethical and entrepreneurial spirit of our alumni. We invited 17 alumni speakers from India and abroad, from institutions varying from IIM Ahmedabad to IIM Bangalore to University of Chicago, to London School of Economics, to Paris School of Economics, to DSC, to ISI. And we organized 13 virtual sessions, which benefited more than 1,000 participants during the founder month of February. The feedback indeed was very encouraging and the response was overwhelming. In the month of June, we organized 2 important events on International Yoga Day. Live yoga sessions on the eve of International Yoga Day, followed by the Sahaj Yoga meditation sessions, which were in perfect alignment with the theme of International Day of Yoga 2021, that is, be with yoga, be at home. After the success of its various events organized from February 1st, 2021 onwards, the Kirorimal College Alumni Network decided to bring for its students a series of live sessions, starting from the first week of July 2021. And the topic chosen was building career paths by sparking conversation and connections with alumni. One of the objectives of this series is to connect our alumni from different domains, functions, businesses, disciplines, and walks of life with the current batch. With these live sessions, we have been making an attempt to solve queries and provide guidance to the current students for materializing their dreams. We have been trying to ensure learning continuity, and at the same time, we have been trying to promote grit and growth mindset during this period of social isolation. KMC Alumni Network is acting as a bridge between the alumni and the current students. And this connecting arrangement would have been a distant dream for all of us without the sensitivity, stand, and support of our principal madam, Professor Vibha Singh Chauhan, who will be joining us soon. With these words, I welcome our alumna from the Department of Political Science, Ms. Jessica Dower, and all the participants. Over to you, Ishita.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. Giving is not just making a donation, but it is about making a difference. Today, our guest Jessica is making that difference. Jessica is a master's student of international relations at the London School of Economics and Political Science. She completed her undergraduate degree in political science at KMC, University of Delhi, from where she graduated at the top of her class in 2020. She is highly research driven and wishes to use her academic and social research to contribute to think tanks and public research organizations. Her areas of interest include intersectional feminism, conflict and peace building, and post colonial international relations. Having been an academic achiever since a very young age, she aspires to continue her love for academia in the future by pursuing a lecturing profession. She wants to give back to the society by following her personal motto of enable, educate, and empower. Hello, Jessica. I would like to thank you for taking time out from a busy schedule to be here with us today. So let's start. So, Jessica, how do you feel about all the great things that you have achieved today?
Good evening, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for being here with me to listen to my journey. And I hope that you all are doing well and are safe and healthy given the pandemic. As you all know, that I'm currently pursuing my master's in international relations at the LSE. It's very kind of you to feel that I have achieved a lot of things thus far. Of course, it's a great feeling because even though I aspire to do a lot of things and I feel that I'm very, very young right now, but there are still tiny victories and accomplishments that I believe I've achieved. And of course, I feel very proud of myself for having accomplished those. And I would not discredit myself of those. So it's a wonderful feeling to be able to be at my dream university and study the subject that most interests and fascinates me. And I'm genuinely very grateful to the people around me for that, for having that kind of influence on me, so that I can pursue my dreams and stay motivated and stay inspired constantly. But yes, of course, there's a long way to go and there's a lot that I want to do both personally and professionally. So I look forward to do that in the future. But yeah, I feel wonderful and I feel really, really honored and privileged to be here and to be given the opportunity to share insights with all of you, because if I was in your place, I would want such sessions to be held frequently so that I can get the right amount and kind of guidance on a regular basis. And I think it's a wonderful platform for all of us to sort of come together and share things with each other, and most importantly, to build a connection with one another, because it's not just about sharing information and knowledge, but also to be able to connect with each other and help each other in the future, so that we can form a beautiful, warm support system and a big community for each other. So yeah, that's all I'd like to say. And I'm really happy. Thank you so much.
Okay, so what is your plan moving forward now?
So my plan, I would like to answer that in two parts. Currently, I am working on my dissertation, and the topic of my dissertation is basically a critique of gender mainstreaming as an international policy approach, where I'm particularly critiquing an international policy called the WPS, which is the Women, Peace and Security Agenda of the United Nations. That is my case study, and I'll be critiquing that from a post-colonial feminist perspective. Now, I understand that these terms might be slightly technical for people who are not studying political science or haven't studied IR. But so given that this is my dissertation outline, these are the areas that I am particularly interested in and would want to pursue a career in the future. And like you mentioned in my introduction as well, that I wish to use my academic research to firstly contribute to think tanks and then eventually teach. So that's exactly what my plan is. I'll be graduating next month, hopefully, and I plan to work from then on. So I would be working with a think tank called the Chatham House, which is in international affairs in the United Kingdom. And I will be working with the Energy, Environment and Resource Department of the Chatham House. It's a 12-week program, following which I plan to work with them full time for a couple of years. And I would want to contribute through my research to think tanks and similar such organizations, which eventually help in policy making at the international level, because that's what the whole idea is. It's not just to generate research and information, because we have an overload of that, but also to help that inform policy making, which eventually would help the people, because that's what my goal is, to give back to society. So that's what is on my agenda as of now. And once I get some work experience and some experience in terms of research, then I would want to do a PhD in something to do with gender and international relations, because that's what excites me the most. But I'm still trying to understand the specificities of it, and to understand something at a more narrow level, what would really excite me, given that PhD is a long-term commitment. So once I have that idea, then I think I would go further with my PhD and eventually teach at a university. So that's my plan.
Okay. So how and when did you make up your mind for pursuing a degree abroad?
Well, there's no specific date or time where I decided, oh, I want to study abroad. I always had that thing in mind, that I wanted to get a more wholesome education experience. And in my opinion, if you travel to a different country, whatever that might be, you can get a different perspective on things. And so that's why I decided to study abroad. I planned to do that in my latter years of school itself. And I had plans to pursue political science in my undergrad degree, so that eventually I could study international relations. So I knew that for international relations, it's important to to go to a go to a different country, to an international, to a foreign location, and get a different perspective. So I always planned on that, and I wanted to go to the best university. So I had Oxford, Cambridge, LSE, these universities in mind, because UK was always part of my plan. But unfortunately, Oxford and Cambridge do not have full-fledged courses, master's courses in international relations. So I knew that LSE was the place to be. And that's why I thought that it's the right time to go. Once I would get exposure within my city, that is Delhi, then eventually I would go on to study the subject further. And I think the main reason why I chose to go abroad was also because I wanted to get diversity around me. I wanted to interact with people from very different cultural backgrounds, who spoke different languages, so that I could get that kind of exposure, so that I could understand how people think differently, work differently, how they come from very different backgrounds, and yet what binds us together, what makes us human, what is common between us. So to understand all of this, I think that's what basically shaped my decision to go and study abroad. And I decided that basically when I was in 12th, and then concretized my plan in first and second year of my undergrad degree at KMC.
Okay. So what was your criteria behind shortlisting the potential countries and universities?
Well, as far as countries are concerned, I just targeted UK, and the basic reason for that is the master's courses in the UK are usually 12 months long. So the duration of the course is shorter, yet it's very intensive. And so the quality of education does not get compromised. And that's what I wanted to do, because I had a very clear cut timeline in my mind that by the time I would be 22, I would want to get done with my master's degree, so that I can either go on to work or start with my PhD. So now that my PhD plan has been deferred, I want to work. It's still aligned with my timeline. And essentially, that's why I decided to go for UK, because the courses are very intense. And I like that. I like to be given lots of assignments and deadlines so that I can finish and I can deliver quality work. And also at the same time, I can finish things as soon as possible so that I have time for more things, so that I can plan on my life. And it just saved me a lot of time. Had instead, if I had gone for a course which was 2 years long, then maybe it would have been lighter, less intense, but it would have still taken me 2 years to do that. So that was basically the reason for choosing UK. And as for the universities, I had two main things in mind. First was to see where my course was available, where international relations as a full-fledged master's degree was available. And there are limited universities for that, because even if you talk about universities like Oxford and Cambridge, they have specialized courses like global politics or something like international political economy or other aspects of international relations. But to study IR as a more holistic discipline, there are very limited universities, and LSE, King's, or University of Warwick and Edinburgh, these are some of those which have full-fledged IR courses. So that was the main criteria. And second was, of course, to look at the rankings, which universities ranked in like the top 10, top 15 universities with respect to IR, not other disciplines. That is very, very important to see that for IR, what university is the best, or for social sciences, what university would give me a better experience than the rest. So this was basically the idea to understand and to plan where I would want to apply.
Okay, so how has your experience been in LSE?
Well, I would like to call it a bittersweet experience. And I think it's pretty clear to everybody why I would say that. It's bitter because it's very, very intense. And definitely there have been a lot of things on my plate in the last 1 year. Initially it was very overwhelming because there was some things that I was not used to even at DU, because I had to do almost 15 to 20 readings every week, and I was not used to that while my undergrad study at DU. So lots of readings to do, lots of essays to write, and also why it was bitter is because you see people from very diverse backgrounds. You see people who have come after 3-4 years of work experience, who've worked at maybe UN, or who are coming after studying from Oxford, Cambridge, all these universities, and um, the education that they have received is very different from what I was used to. And it's very similar to how things are at LSE. So it's easier for them. And then, you're constantly looking at other people, and you feel that, oh, maybe I'm not as good as them. So I need to work harder. I need to struggle and hustle more. So that kind of makes it bitter, but that is the positive side of it, because in a way, that's what uh, drove me to work harder and to work relentlessly. And even though I struggled a bit in the first 2-3 months of my study at LSE, I still managed to overcome the problems that I was facing. And now I've gotten used to reading more. My capacity to take in more information has increased. I can write at a better speed than I could earlier. So it's just about growth, and there's a lot of growth that you get from an experience like this, even if it's very intense and time consuming and overwhelming. And apart from that, the course IR is very, very theoretical, which is something that I personally enjoy. So it's not all bitter. It's been very sweet for me as well to be able to study the subject that I enjoy. I got to study gender and international relations, which is something that personally appeals to me a lot. And besides that, yes, my experience to an extent was slightly impeded because of the pandemic, and the education was hybrid. So I couldn't really go on campus as frequently as I would want to, or interact with people as much as I had expected. But despite that, even through the online medium, I could make use of the resources that the college provided, and I could still meet people through sessions and socials that we had online. And basically, I could. It comes down to what you take from what you're given. So I tried to make use of every resource possible. So I would say that I had a great time in the last 1 year at LSE.
Okay. So I'm sure many of our viewers would also be aiming to get into such colleges. Can you explain in brief the admission process for the same?
Yeah, definitely. So I have prepared a small presentation to explain that. And if you don't mind, I would share my screen.
Yeah, you can just screen share it.
Perfect. I hope it's visible to everybody.
Yes, it is.
Perfect. Yes. So I will be explaining the admission process now. The first part is when to start preparing. So I would give some basic preparation tips. Firstly, it's great if you could start 8 to 12 months before applying, because if you leave this to the last minute, then I think you would just be panicking and you will be overwhelmed with so much information. So it's better to start well in advance. And I think 8 to 10 months is the perfect time to do that. Second tip would be to research as much as possible. Don't go overboard with it. Don't just go and read everything that's there online. Be selective, but still try to cover the university websites. Or if you do not like to read that much, then maybe you can go to YouTube and watch the official videos of different universities that interest you. You could watch student vlogs, and abundance of them are available on YouTube. And I personally really enjoy watching those. So you can do that and get some idea about the university, about the course. And probably you can also search for responses on Quora to get to know people's personal experiences, because people are very honest about their opinions now. So you'll get a more holistic idea of how things are. Then the third tip would be to list down the universities with your course available. So a lot of times what happens is we assume that, oh, it's a very famous university and it would have the course of my choice, but it doesn't. So to do that in the very beginning is very, very essential. So I would suggest that you first list out the universities which have the course that interests you available. Finally, I would suggest you to shortlist 10 to 12 universities to apply to, as I mentioned in the previous answer, based on eligibility. That is, if you are eligible to meet the requirements of the university and the course that you're applying to. Secondly, what interests you, that's very important. Don't just go for the rankings and the brand names of the universities, but also see that the course that interests you is available and then you go for it. And finally, yes, rankings are also important. So do look out for that as well. But do not apply to every university out there. Keep it to 10 to 15 universities max, and you will definitely land a place somewhere. But don't keep it less than that, because that might be a little risky. But I think 10 to 15 universities is the perfect range. And finally, read the requirements, read their specifications and what differentiates them from the rest, because that research will also help you frame and curate your answer for the personal statement, which you will eventually write as part of your application. Now, when to apply? So September to November of the preceding year, which means that if you are applying for 2022-23 session of your course, then you will apply this year, which is 2021. And if you plan to apply later, then probably you will postpone your plan accordingly. But it's 1 year before the course begins. Most universities, including LSE, open their portals in October. Some might do in September, but that is very unlikely. And some might in November as well. But October is the month where most universities open. So look out for it in October. It's best to apply in the first week itself. I personally feel that that doesn't really affect your the eligibility or whether or not you will get admission, or whether it's better to apply first or not. But the earlier you do it, the better it is, because the earlier you'll get the response. So for instance, at LSE, the offer letters are sent in approximately 8 weeks, that is 2 months. But with other universities, you could get it earlier. You could get it in 3 to 4 weeks as well. It depends. But yeah, it's better if you apply first, because it'll just get the burden off the chest and you'll be more free and you'll be in a lighter head space. Finally, we come to how to apply. where I talk about the 5 basic entry requirements for most universities. And I'm specifically covering social science courses. And in particular, I will talk about it with respect to my own course, that is IR. So do not rely on this 100%. Do your research properly and see if your course might have some other specific requirements or any additional needs. But this is what I basically looked at. So first is your English language requirements. Then you have the academic performance, your degree requirements, then personal statement, CV, and finally your academic references. So firstly, I'll talk about the English language requirements. There are 2 tests, IELTS and TOEFL. IELTS is the most popular for UK. For US, you might take up TOEFL, and for other countries, it could differ. I gave IELTS, and as I've mentioned, for most universities, the minimum overall band is 6.5 to 7. For the LSE, it was 7. And for specific sections, it could differ, like I've mentioned here on the slide. So just take note of that. And I got an overall band of 8. Even if you get, I think, 6.5, you will be eligible for most other universities in the UK, but for LSE, it is 7. Then I come to your degree requirements or academic performance. So on most websites, you'll find upper second class honors, 2:1 degree or equivalent. And when I was in college, I did not know what that meant, because that's a very foreign thing, not something that we are familiar with in India. Upper second class honors basically means merit that is 65% or above, but it could differ from course to course. It has to be in a related discipline. So if, for instance, you are going to study IR in your master's, then make sure that your undergrad degree is slightly aligned with IR. It could be different, it could be economics, it could be history, but you still have to try and understand how that relates with IR, and how you can probably mention that in your personal statement, in your application, that how history drove you to study IR, or what interests you about history, which is related to IR, something like that. So it has to be somewhat related. Indian university standards, as I mentioned, 65% or above is the basic criteria, which means in terms of GPA, it could be around 7.7 to 8 GPA, which again differs across universities and across the course that you have done. So for Pol Science, the requirement could be different. For economics, it could be slightly different. And again, for the course that you are applying to, IR, as opposed to maybe economics, it could be different. So do look at those requirements. They're very specific. I personally needed an average GPA of 8. And one more thing that I haven't mentioned in the slide is how the transcript system works. So when you apply, you will have to submit your transcript till the 4th semester, the results that you have got in the first 4 semesters. And if you meet the minimum eligibility criterion, then you will be made a conditional offer. After that, if you score the same, which you've been asked to score in the next 2 semesters, 5th and 6th, then they will make you an unconditional. If you do not meet that requirement, then your conditional offer will unfortunately be revoked. So just keep that in mind. The third entry requirement is the personal statement, which is again very, very important. After your marks, personal statement is what they look at to judge whether or not you are eligible for admission. So it has to be strictly academic. In the UK, academic personal statements are the biggest deal. So in the US, it might be slightly different. This is what I've heard, that they want to know more about how you are as a person, how you engage in activities other than academics. But in the UK, they want to know more about what you've done when you studied your course. So it has to be academic, it has to be well structured and coherent. These are the basic things about how you write any piece. It has to be original and well researched. I think originality to me is the most important factor. So a lot of people, they get their personal statements written from other people. I would advise you against that. It's better if it's written by you. You can of course get it honed and edited by somebody else if you're not confident of your writing skills, but make sure that the thoughts are original and that you've well researched the requirements of the personal statement of the university that you are applying to. And it's best if you start a couple months in advance, because if you do your research well, then there's no doubt you will produce a quality statement. Fourthly, it should demonstrate enthusiasm for the discipline, which means that they want to see how that discipline interests you on a personal level. Like if I'm applying for IR, then I have to show that in my statement that I'm genuinely passionate and enthusiastic about IR, and how I've drawn from real life examples of international politics that have interested me on a personal level. So things like that have to be mentioned in the statement. Fifthly, academic engagement with the subject is very important, which means that it's not just showing that, oh, it interests me, but to actually demonstrate that you are well read. So if you've read some important IR works, important scholars in IR would be, for instance, Immanuel Kant, or maybe political realists like Morgenthau or Kenneth Waltz. I'm just giving examples. Some of you might not be familiar, but these are examples of important IR scholars. So if you could read their works and probably quote them, critically engage with them, and show that in the personal statement that I have read these works and this is what interests me about their works. This is what I feel is a limitation in their works, and I could personally make this addition to their work. If you could show that in your paper, I think that would be great, which is something that they personally look at. And I also incorporated in my personal statement. So that engagement is very important. Then alignment with career objectives. You have to be very clear about what you want to do in the future and how this course will help you get there. I think that's self-explanatory. I don't need to explain that in more detail. Finally, mention your relevant knowledge, skills, and experience, whatever internships or volunteer work you've done and how that relates to the subject that you are applying to. And finally, look at this percentage. 80% should cover academic interest and 20% will include extracurricular activities. Why I have put a star next to extracurricular activities is because if you can try, relate those extracurricular activities again to your discipline. So everything has to come back to your subject and why those extracurricular activities have interested you and how they are relevant to your discipline. If you could make those connections in your personal statement and link everything back to the subject that you're applying to, I think that would make your statement perfect and flawless. Finally, we come to CV. Very basic things I would like to explain about that. Firstly, don't make it longer than 2 pages. 1 to 2 pages is perfect. Relevant work experience is appreciated, but not necessary. So you do not have to have worked in that field. But if you've done it, of course, it is appreciated. 2 to 3 internships or projects relevant to your subject are a great add-on. So try and do something with respect to your work, which shows that you have gained some experience outside of the classroom. Volunteer work at NGOs or any kind of initiatives, social work initiatives that you've taken is very necessary in my opinion. So if you've worked with some NGOs or if you've done anything of that sort, that's very much appreciated. And I think it's something that just makes you stand out from other people who might not have done something like that. And finally, if you've done any online courses or learned any new skills, or if you've learned any foreign languages, then that again gives you an advantage over the rest. So try and mention that in your CV. Lastly, about the references, there's not much to say, but you have to nominate 2 college professors who have taught you and try and pitch them at least a month in advance because it's a long drawn process. Finally, make a list of your academic endeavors and initiatives because they might not know you very well. They might know how you are academically, but otherwise they might not. So you have to keep those things handy so that you can show it to them and tell them this is what you've done so that they can incorporate those things in the reference that they write. And finally, keep your drafts handy because some professors might not want to write the entire thing for you. So if you have some drafts in hand to give to them, which they can amend and edit eventually, then that'll be great. This is a quote: great things happen to those who don't stop believing, trying, learning, and being grateful. So just believe, try, work hard, try to learn as much as possible, and be grateful for all the things that you have, and you will definitely achieve what you wish to achieve. And that's it. Thank you. You can note down my email address if you have any questions with respect to the application process, and I will be happy to answer your questions. But that's all for now. Thank you.
Okay.
And I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Jessica. It was really informative and I think it will help everybody a lot. So you can just stop screen sharing and then we can continue further.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, since you have been such a meritorious student from the start, how did you manage between your extracurriculars and academics?
Well, to me, balance in general is very important. Um, I mean, I would like to answer this question in a very different way. So instead of just talking about how I've maintained the balance between academics and extracurriculars, this one advice that I would want to give to anybody that I meet is that balance eventually comes from within. So if you are a balanced person from within, which means mentally and emotionally, then automatically you are more stable. Your moods are stable. You have time for more things because you do not end up wasting time getting caught in thoughts which do not add value. And when you have more time, you're automatically going to spend time doing different kinds of things, eventually maintaining a balance. So, doing things in a balanced and sustainable way is very important. And to make sure I do that, I try to keep my mental and emotional well being in place. So, for that, I meditate. And I would suggest everybody to find something like that. It's not necessary that you have to start doing yoga, but you can also sort of find something like a hobby, maybe that interests you, which will definitely make sure that you are more stable, that you are more calm, and you will automatically find other things to do because everything eventually falls into place when your mind is in the right state. And trust me on that, that's how it works. So do that. Secondly, what I have regretted the most in my life is in school, I was very much inclined towards academics and I was given a lot of opportunities to participate in sports, in extracurriculars, but I never took those up because academics was so important to me. But once I was out of school, I could really understand the difference between people who are too much into academics and those who have had a more balanced life. And I wanted to be the latter. I wanted to be the person who has that balance. So, having made that mistake in college, I made the conscious choice to go out of my way and make sure that I'm not just focusing on academics, but doing other things as well. And it's not necessary that you have to join college societies for that. Of course, if you're doing that, it's wonderful and you must. But if you do not have the drive to maybe, engage in society work or work with a lot of people, you can do other things as well. You can take up hobbies and you can find what interests you. So to me, for instance, there's music, there's art, there's food that interests me, or fashion. There's so many things to do. And today you have a lot of opportunities available. You have access to more things than your previous generations did. So it's good to make use of those. And that's how I think you can achieve a balance in your life. The second thing that I would like to point out is again going back to my first point about having more mental and emotional stability, which eventually helps other things fall in place. So for that, I think the reason why I have seen people of my generation, especially, not being in the best mental and emotional state is because we are spending too much time on social media, maybe. And I'm not saying that you should stop doing that. It's important and it's rewarding in its own ways. But if you could regulate that to a small amount of time in the day, then I think that would be perfect because one, you will find time for other things. And secondly, that space can be slightly negative and can be slightly demotivating for most of us because we are exposing ourselves to just happy positive things about other people, and that can make us compare ourselves to others. So if you can firstly regulate the amount of time you spend on social media, and secondly, if you could probably work on that and make that space more positive and rewarding for you by probably unfollowing things that are not adding value or following kinds of content which interest you more. Like, I do not follow everything that's there on social media, but I will restrict myself to following certain kinds of content which interest me on a personal level and which I feel add value to me and help me grow and also keep me happy and sane. It's not just about growth professionally, but also personally, things that make you happy have to be kept in mind. So these are the things that I feel help me maintain a balance between academics and extracurriculars and other things as well, which are not just about working and putting yourself out there and comparing yourself to other people, but also things that personally make you happy, whether it's music, art, dance, literature, or writing, anything of that sort.
Okay, so like you said that you want to pursue probably lecturing or research. So are there also any other career options that you can pursue after IR?
Definitely. A lot of people might not be aware of the different opportunities that are available to people who are studying IR. So I can list them out for you and probably give you like a better analysis of what could work for you on a personal level and what wouldn't. So apart from teaching and academic career, in IR, there's a lot of opportunities for research because if you study a discipline like IR, you are anyway exposing yourself to a very multidisciplinary and versatile field of study. So it will automatically open up your mind and help you understand that there are so many things out there academically that you would be interested in, and it will help you choose what most interests you. So research endeavors are definitely a great option. Now again, research is very broad, so there are different options in that which you could choose again based on what interests you. One would be policy research. So we have policies at different levels. As you all know, there's local level policies or state level policies, there's national level policies and international policies. So whichever of these interests you, you could possibly go and research those policies, analyze them, and become policy researchers, become policy analysts, become consultants. Similarly, and related to this are political analysts. So policy analyst is where you are analyzing policy specifically, but political analysis is where you are analyzing political developments. Again, very broad. So you could probably analyze different um, countries or what is happening politically in different continents or different geographies of the world, or also probably look at geopolitics, look at security issues. So there's a diverse range of options that are available to you, even in research itself, which is really broad and really wide, and the scope is huge currently because even after the pandemic, if you see that the market in a lot of fields has gone down in terms of research, it has definitely opened up because of the pandemic. There's more need for research in every field out there because everything has been affected by the pandemic. So I think research is something that's definitely there. And apart from that, I think you can go to join public sector organizations, whether it's at the international level like the United Nations, or at the national level if you're willing to join any government bodies and help people who are representatives politically, to better make sense of national and international developments. And I feel that studying IR will give you a very wholesome experience and a very holistic understanding of the world. You will not just study politics or foreign policy, war and peace, but you will also understand how these things affect people at the individual level, as well as based on their socio-economic political identities. So how people of different genders get affected through something very international. So how you can connect the international with the local. Things like that you will also get to understand and experience when you study IR, that it's not just about countries and states, but it's also about the people and how they get affected. So if you have that kind of understanding and then you go on to join a public sector organization or you go on to join the government and you can help and inform policy making from that perspective, it is going to be very helpful for our future generations because context sensitivity and being sensitive to the needs of the people is very, very important. And that's something that's very much lacking in the policies that we see today. So if you can try and incorporate those, and go on to become a policymaker or go on to become an informant to a politician, I think it's going to be very helpful for the society in general. It sounds idealistic, but that's how changes happen. So I believe these are some of the important opportunities that are available to people studying IR.
Okay, so that was really very informative. And did you face any failures as well during your journey?
Well, it depends on how you define failure. So, if failure is essentially about not achieving what you intend to achieve, then everybody fails. It's humanly impossible to not fail in that case, because you can never ever get everything that you want. But if you tailor that definition and say that failure is not just about not achieving what you wish to achieve, but also not taking anything out of that experience of not achieving, that is what failure is to me. So maybe in uh, maybe a few years ago, I did fail a lot because I was not getting what I wanted, but at the same time, I was not learning anything out of those experiences. But um, with time, you try to understand that these experiences are what build you. They make you stronger. They make you more resilient. And that is how you are shaped as a person. I would like to give an example for this. So in second year of my college, I decided to contest elections for the political science department because I was advised by a few of my friends that this is something that I could do. I could represent people. I was on good terms with everybody in my department. I used to interact with everyone. And I had anyway worked for the department in my first year. And academically also, I was doing well. So I decided to go for it. I was not aware of a lot of other things that are at play when it comes to elections, because it's super political. And as a result, I did not end up winning the elections. But despite that, the experience that I had, whether it was to interact with people at a different level, to curate agendas and manifestos, to understand what I could probably do to help the department grow, to make it more valuable for people of the pol science department, and again giving speeches, talking to people, going out there and representing your department, things like that, they make you really confident. They also help you understand how human psychology works, how people think, how people perceive you, and how you can try and change yourself in a way so um, that people are more receiving towards you, people are more warm towards you, things like that. So that is how even failure, even if I failed and even if I lost the elections, that experience was very, very valuable to me. And I did end up, even personally, it affected me a lot because I did not continue being on good terms with a lot of people because of that experience, but it shaped me a lot. So I think failure definitely happens every step of the way, but if you take the right things back from them, then you cannot say that you have failed. Then that is the best form of success.
Okay, so thank you so much. And lastly, would you like to give any final tips to our viewers?
Well, I think I've mentioned most of the things that I would suggest everybody else for, not just pursuing their career aspirations, but also to make sure that it's personally rewarding and fulfilling for you. So yes, I think it's very important to sit with yourself and understand and know what you want to do and what you do not want to do. Because if you do not have that clarity, then what happens is you will look around, you will see other people probably getting a job or getting into the university of their choice, and you will just be led in the wrong direction. You will feel, oh, that person is doing that, maybe I should do the same. But no, you have to really sit with yourself, you have to be honest with yourself and let yourself open up to you, for which you'll probably have to just like switch things off and just probably be in a closed room for a few days. But you really need to understand what you want and what you do not want, because once you have that clarity, then from there moving on becomes very much easier and simpler, and it becomes a more rewarding experience for sure. So just being able to align what you personally want and are passionate about with what you would want to pursue professionally, that alignment just makes things so much easier, and it'll just be a happy experience for you after that. So doing that and other things that I mentioned, technical things that you could do to possibly make sure that you are in a better state of mind when you're working on this, because I understand that thinking about your career, it can be very intimidating, and it can put you in a very uncomfortable position as well. So I know saying things is easier, but I know I've also been in that position and I have overcome that. And everybody, each one of you is capable of doing that. So just sit with yourself for some time and know what you want. And you all are special and capable and unique, and you can do everything that you wish to do. So I just want to wish everybody good luck. And if you have any questions, you can personally come up to me, and I'd be really, really happy to answer those. But do not get uncomfortable with the idea of achieving your dreams, because you can do it for sure.
Thank you so much, Jessica. That was really very helpful and also inspiring. So, coming towards the end of the session, I would like to thank you again on behalf of our whole team of Alma Connect for being with us today. You have really inspired. Yeah.
Ishita, I'm interrupting you. There is one question in the chat box, and please raise this question. At the same time, there are audience who have come from different departments with a specific purpose in mind, that they wanted to meet Jessica, at the same time wanted to raise questions.
Okay.
So, yeah, please.
Yeah, so we can take up questions from the
Yeah,
audience as
please,
well.
yeah.
So the first question is, what changes do you think you experienced while studying abroad, and how it affected your thinking and perspective?
Well, like I mentioned, with respect to why I decided to go abroad, was because I wanted that wholesome perspective, which I believe I got. There are two important factors. One is the fact that the education is different from what you are exposed to in your undergrad study. It could be more intense because there's a lot of reading that needs to be done and a lot of writing, at least as far as my study at LSE is concerned. I was supposed to produce around 2 essays in a fortnight or so, and I had to do 15-20 readings every week. So just getting into the habit of constantly reading and getting that much information in a small period of time, it makes you it just makes you work harder. It makes you understand the importance of meeting deadlines, because that's something that's very important even in future when you go on to work. Your ability to meet deadlines and to have a clear cut timeline in head is very important. So that's something that was more intense for me as compared to my experience in the past. And secondly, it's about the kind of people that you meet. So because you're meeting people from all over the world, everybody has very different sets of experiences. Everybody comes from very different universities, from very different cultures, and their way of doing things, their lifestyle, their approach to studying, as well as to just being how they are, is very, very different. So when you interact with those people, you learn a lot. You not just learn about how other people are, but about yourself as well. So it's not just about getting to know other people and networking with those people, but also about understanding yourself in the process. Because at the end of the day, you're going to be with yourself. And that kind of self knowledge and self awareness is something that you will learn when you go abroad, because you're living independently, you're living alone, and you will have more time to spend with yourself. But at the same time, you meet very different people, and that's going to expose you to very different perspectives. And so you become more open minded, you become more accommodative of other people's and opinions and views, rather than just being inside this well, knowing that what I know is enough and what I know is right. But you understand that it's not all black and white. Everybody is a product of their circumstances. Everybody is shaped in different ways, and that's why they hold those kinds of opinions. That's why they are the way they are. So that just makes you open-minded, it makes you explorative, it makes you accommodative, and most importantly, it makes you empathetic. So I think that is very, very important. And that's how I feel my experience abroad has changed and shaped me.
Okay. So Aryan Sahu, you have raised your hand. So do you have any question? You can unmute yourself and ask.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jessica, for the really nice interview. Session. I just wanted to ask you about one thing. Like, what else are we supposed to do apart from our general college curriculum, and what these universities look for? I mean, something apart from dance and music.
Well, like I mentioned, you can probably take up some internships and some volunteer work, because at the end of the day, it's about not just doing extra work, but also ensuring that it is relevant to what you want to do, because universities in the UK are academically very rigorous and they are looking for people who are academically driven. So everything has to link back to your subject and what you want to do. So if you can possibly find any internships or any kind of projects to work on, which will help you probably understand what you want to do career wise and what interests you as a subject or whatever you want to do in future, taking those up, I think it's the perfect thing to do. So if I talk about my own experience in my first and second year, I did not know much about what exactly I wanted to do. So I ended up doing some internships because I saw that everybody else was doing internships around me, but those were in content writing because I felt that is one skill that I had and I felt I could make use of. So I ended up doing a few internships in content writing. Now, they might not have been very much related to what my career aspirations were, but still, it was a good experience for me. However, in the process of that, I did understand that it's not just content writing, but academic writing and research writing is what interests me more. So that is how I started looking for internships which were more research oriented or which were driven towards policy making or just understanding and implementing policy. That's how I started looking for internships in maybe think tanks or research organizations. And I also ended up doing an internship with the Delhi government because they have these summer and winter internship programs. And over there, there's not a lot of research that has to be done, but you're still able to understand how the public policy process works. So I was in the health ministry and I basically was assigned a couple of projects, one of which was to make sure that the Delhi government hospitals, their complaints from the patients were getting resolved in time and that process was getting streamlined and sped up with time. So through these experiences, I think you definitely understand more about what you want to do, what interests you. So if you can look for such internships, which I feel are available um, online on platforms like LinkedIn or Internshala, things like these, I think you can definitely spend time doing that, and you'll also understand more about your subject.
All right. Thank you. May I ask one more question?
Yeah, sure.
One more thing. Just do they have a minimum CGPA sort of a thing which they look at every semester in your college days?
Semester wise, no, but like I mentioned in the presentation, I don't know if you follow the presentation, but in that I mentioned that for academic
Yes,
performance,
65.
the minimum criteria is roughly 65%. Again, it differs across universities. LSE does have a more rigorous requirement, which is, for me, it was 8 CGPA, but for other courses, it could differ. It could be 7.5 as well. Um, so that's how it is, but you have to look at the specific requirements of your course, by which I mean not just what you want to do but also the course that you are currently pursuing. It's all mentioned on the website. They have tables made and they have mentioned how university rankings affect your marks. So if, for instance, Delhi University is one of the top ranked universities in Delhi, then your requirement will be slightly less than other people studying at other universities. So it really differs from course to course, university to university. But for me, it was 8 CGPA for IR in political science.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Arun. Now, Deep Acharya has also raised his hand. So you can go ahead with the question. You can just unmute yourself.
All right. Hello, Jessica. Firstly, thank you for that interactive session. So I have a similar future aspiration like you. I want to pursue IR or global politics for my master's, and I've shortlisted a few universities. That is, as you know, that Oxford and Cambridge has their MPhil in IR or in global politics. That is the Blavatnik School of Government. And in case of LSE, so did you take, while you were preparing, did you take Sciences Po into consideration? Because according to this year's QS and Times high ranking, Sciences has actually crossed LSE and has gone after Harvard.
Yeah. I did not take Sciences Po into consideration. I do not have any specific reason for that. I just shortlisted colleges in the UK because I wanted to target one country at once. And I think it gets really overwhelming to look at a lot of geographies and different universities. But of course, it's something that you can definitely consider, one. And two, even at LSE, we have some dual degrees in international security studies and IR. So a lot of my batchmates currently are studying their second year at LSE, but they had their first year back in Sciences Po, in which they studied international security. So I think that course is it's a very, very good course. And I've seen people who have studied that, and they are one of the sharpest and the most intellectually driven people that I have met. So Sciences Po is definitely a very, very good university to be. And if you're considering that, yeah, I think it's a great option. And I did not consider it, but I would encourage you to go for it. And if you can possibly look at the dual degree, I think that's a great option.
All right. I just have another question, ma'am. Anushka, can I please ask? Yeah. So yeah.
Please turn on your camera, Deep.
Ma'am, actually the light is not working. I'm in Delhi.
It's fine. It's fine.
So yes, exactly. That dual degree program is what I'm targeting. Secondly, as you told that you did an internship from Delhi government, so I Googled up and there are few internships from AAP, or there are few internships from Confederation of Young Leaders. So can you please name a few think tanks or name a few organizations that provide internships related to policy formulation and IR?
Yeah, sure. So when I started up looking for internships, it was definitely a very at start it's very intimidating because you see some people around you getting those internships, but you can't, because unfortunately some government internships are not easy to get, and secondly, even through merit you are not able to get them because sometimes they just don't end up responding to you even if you apply and you are eligible and capable enough to get those. So for instance, if it's with Niti Aayog, I did not get any response from there, but I know a few people who did. So probably if you can try your hand at that and see if you get a response. Then you have Ministry of External Affairs. In that, getting an internship is relatively easier. And also one suggestion that I got from some people was that if you go to their website, Ministry of External Affairs, and you see email IDs of different joint secretaries, you can mail them personally and you can ask them if they have any opportunities available or if they want any personal assistance, and you can probably work with those. You can also look for different MLAs, MPs if you're willing to work under them, because that can also give you a good experience. And Delhi government internship, I don't know if there's still those programs available, or the specific program that I was part of, if that's still there, I'm not sure. But if you Google Delhi government internships and you find something like that, you can apply, because that is genuine and you will definitely get a response on that. Even if like you get rejected, you will still know that yes is what it is, but to not know is the worst. So yeah, these are some of the government bodies or ways to get into the government. Apart from that, if you want to look at think tanks, research internships, then there's Center for Civil Society, there's Center for Policy Research, Center for Public Policy Research, and then there is Foreign Policy Research Institute, Foreign Policy Research Center, and Institute of Public Administration, I think. you'll find a lot of such organizations, and I mean, it's very much possible for you to get to work with one of these. So just look up think tanks, and you'll find a lot of them. But these are some of the ones that I know, and yeah, I think I've named them. But if you want a list, like a comprehensive list, you can contact me personally. I'd be happy to send that to you.
All right, thank you. That would be all. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Deep. And also the next question in the chats are, what are the scholarships available for studying IR at LSE?
Well, I cannot guide you much on that because I did not apply for a scholarship. But what I can tell you is that there are some government scholarships for other universities, like for Oxford and Cambridge, there's Felix Scholarship. And then for LSE, in IR, I've not heard of many scholarships, if I'm being honest. In other subjects, other disciplines, there's Chevening Scholarship and a couple more. But honestly, I don't know much about them because I personally did not apply for a scholarship. It's a very personal choice. I did not take that up. But if you go on the website, I think it's very much out there, and it's very clearly mentioned if how it's possible to qualify for one, how you can apply for that, which you will find on the website. So if you could just search and see, that'll be better for you, because I honestly do not have much information on that.
Okay, thank you. And if anybody has any other questions, you can just raise your hand. So seeing none, I think we can proceed to end the session. So that was really inspiring and very informative. Personally, even I learned a lot from that. So coming towards the end of the session, I would like to thank you again on behalf of our whole team of Alma Connect for being with us today. You have really helped us and inspired us a lot. I would also like to thank our Honorable Principal Ma'am, Professor Vibha Singh Chauhan, and Seema Ma'am, our staff coordinator, for their constant effort and support throughout these sessions. Last but not the least, I would also like to thank our viewers for being with us today. So thank you, everyone. I think we can all start leaving the meeting now.